Monkey. Yeah.
He asked if you were born with nuts. Oh, yeah, 100%. I was circumcised as well.
Why do I think trans people are not good? Well, basically because they are trying to push their agenda into kids. That leads to kids making irreversible actions, chemically castrate them,
Do you think
triggering
that I
eating.
yes, but straight up hormone treatment just because they feel like it? Do you think that's how it works?
A kid, as his parents see him always playing with a doll, and then they're like, oh, maybe he's female, or the doctor says, oh, I can make a lot of money out of him because it's a lot of money.
Way to prove this, or is this just the thing you hear in the media and you think this reflects a much larger societal problem than it actually does? You are claiming that there's a huge systematic problem of parents seeing kids playing with dolls and immediately being like, oh, they must be a woman, let's take them to the doctor. As if that's the thing that inspires parents to check if their kid has gender dysphoria. I already disagree with that. But you're saying not only when they bring them to the doctor wants to make a profit, so the doctor then says, oh, well, actually, they have gender dysphoria. Is there like any way to sustain this? Because you're putting this ill motive, this narrative in this perspective, when I would say that if we were to look at a majority of cases, it's a completely different story. So then they go to the doctor and they say all these different things. And the doctors are like, okay, we're going to observe the kid for a while. We're going to see if they have gender dysphoria. This is not just, oh, I feel this way one week, so we're going to handle this and do this all in the next week. This is a multi-year progress. You're putting all this ill intent. Now, in the way I'm describing it, which I feel is based on what I've seen, is the majority of cases with young trans people. Do you feel that there is something going wrong in the scenario that I'm giving you?
Yeah, there is a lot of people, like people with very progressive views that want their child to be a trans. I know many cases like that.
But I need something that represents systematic issues rather than anecdotal silliness.
Okay, so I'm just saying that there are cases like that, but let's not, if you don't want to regard them, okay? Second thing is people that are taking kids seriously, kids that have no real grasp of reality, kids that are believing that Santa is giving them presents or that there are midgets in their closets or something like that. They might actually believe it's true, and then they hear him say, oh, I'm a girl, and then they just, okay, let's take him to a doctor, and the doctor somehow says he might have gender dysphoria, and then they put him under puberty blockers, and then they say, oh wait, so okay, we will wait a bit and then we will assess if he's still under gender dysphoria. But then and another point I'd like to address is you're from the US, right?
I am from the US.
Do you like your healthcare system?
I am not a fan of the US healthcare system.
Yeah, because it's horrible, because they're making a ton of money out of you. Do you think they're not making a ton of money out of trans people, procedure, like the surgeries or medicine or overall?
I would say if there was a lot of money to be made in with the trans community, then you would have pretty much all of the politicians in line with the quote-unquote trans agenda if there was real significant money to be made in that front. Now let me respond to some of your claims. Again, you already explained like, oh, well, the kid is showing some signs and the parents got checked up with the doctor says, let's observe this over a year's period of time. That's precisely the point. The kid, has time to develop. So maybe they discover this when they are 9 years old, let's say, they have shown a consistent pattern of gender dysphoria. They show things like depression as well. They're struggling with their gender identity. Okay. And they go for 5 years. They observe that if the gender dysphoria is consistent. After that period of time, yes, it's still there. Okay. And then they go through puberty blockers.
After, like, when they're still 9 years old, when they still have pretty much no grasp of reality.
Puberty blockers at 9 years old, my friend. What I was
And
describing
they're
with you
putting it in
is
like 13 years
those,
old, and I remember I've done many stupid decisions when I was 13.
again, puberty blockers are reversible. About more years, you decide it's not for you. Okay, it's completely reversible. All right,
Okay.
it's not
Uh,
puberty hormone treatment. Now, at the end of the day, let's look at the effects of transition, potential transition, so on and so forth. Or even if you ignore transition, even if you take the puberty blockers and the hormone treatment out of the picture early on, what are the effects of familial support? We can see that there was a significant decline in the likeliness to be depressed, the likeliness to be anxious, the likeliness to be suicidal.
how?
There,
Because because this is the odd thing, because 50% of trans people suicide. So
and
how
why?
is the chance lower?
That's because trans people are a small group of people that are looked down upon, or in many cases, shamed. And there are studies that, and in many cases, they're prevented from even beginning the process. Now, there are studies showing the effect of transition. You're doing a logical timeline of saying, oh, person is trans, then they become suicidal. No, usually it's person is
No, I
depressed,
think they're. I
then they
think that, and if,
and it,
you might agree with me, they were just predisposed to all of this, um, suicidal thoughts and depression, and
yeah,
because
I would assume that, but I would assume that that is connected to their likely gender dysphoria. Now, there was a large study over many decades and many years that looked into the effects of transition. And in that study, the specific percentage on the positive effects of transition was 93%. And the other 7% was not saying that transition gave negative effects. It actually gave more null, neutral effects. But obviously 93 is significantly larger than 7. So
but it
if
doesn't make sense. Like,
meta-analysis showed that transitioning actually has positive effect on mental health, you can assume that the depression, the suicide, and so forth among the trans community is not necessarily connected to the fact that they are trans and trans alone, but they have a lot of issues relating to being trans or preventing them from doing things like transition, and it's clear that transition seems to be the answer and seems to have objective positive effect.
well, but if you look in it from an objective standpoint, those studies just study if becoming trans is helping them feel better. So it doesn't matter whether the effects on this are external, like people not liking them, or internal, like hormones,
No,
I don't know, dancing in their brains, and they become and they feel better.
so it's not just being trans that
So,
makes them feel, it's the process
so
of transition. The process of transition is the things that help with anxiety, that help with depression, that help with suicide rates. That's what helps, the process. Now,
but
even if
how?
you look at a study that doesn't necessarily look at the effect of sex reassignment surgery or hormone treatment, if you look at familial support, 67% of LGBTQ youth hear that negative statements about LGBTQ people rises to 78% of the child is in the closet. 48% of LGBTQ youth said that their family makes them feel bad for their identity. So trans people have, and other people in the LGBTQ community still have people that look down on them, that dislike them, that put them down. There is still issues within that community, and I would say that social and institutional issues far outweigh any whatever perceived, oh, it's just they're inherently depressed argument you're making. Now, when it comes to strong parental support, the suicide attempt likeliness changes significantly from 57% to 4%, according to a study. And in that study, they also look at depression, anxiety, so on and so forth. And you can see reductions with just parental support alone.
I don't know. I haven't seen those studies. I don't know what is the sample group. I don't know if they cherry picked people.
Well, that thing study, but the study I was referring to earlier that found 93% positive improvements when it came to depression, anxiety, suicide, so forth, when it came to trans people, that was a meta-analysis looking at multiple studies, peer-reviewed studies, from 1991 to 2017. So I would say that holds a lot more weight than the study I just referenced. But point being is those studies still indicate similar things of social transition and physical transition having positive effects on the trans individual.
I don't really understand how is it a 93% positive outlook, like 93% positive better feeling for the trans people when they just have a massive suicide rate, because it just doesn't make sense.
Suicide rate is high, institutional and social reasons. Like I said earlier,
I understand, but the study, it's like contradicting with the study that says, becoming trans helps them, but then 50% of them suicide.
Understanding it correctly. This is talking about people that were able to go through the process of transition, not just them being trans. Being trans doesn't mean you get to go through that process. Being trans doesn't mean a family that supports you. If you have a family that dislikes you, if you have institutions that still prevent you from succeeding or try to throw you out or try to prevent you from being part of it, so on and so forth. If you have society and institutions that shove you away, then yes, that'll affect the suicide rate in a negative way. But the study I'm referring to is analyzing the effect of transition. It's not just being transgender alone.
Okay, so let's talk about this. I'm Jewish. My people have been discriminated against, I think, way more than the trans community ever was. And I'm not trying to make this a race, but I don't remember Jews just killing themselves over people that are saying, "Oh, you dirty Jew" or something like that.
On it, and I don't have the numbers on Jewish suicide rates. It's kind of a silly comparison. We don't even have the data on that. But I would also assume that if someone was born into a Jewish family, even if they were born into like a horrible situation where, let's say, they were in an oppressive country and so on and so forth, at least they had their parents supporting them. At least they had some sort of community. Certain communities form around each other and so on and so forth. To a much larger extent, I would say, than there is to, let's say, like over time for like a trans person to be able to find community when they can't even find support from their parents, much less a broader community, especially in the previous decades. So I'm not interested in oppression Olympics, and these are completely different things. I don't think these are analogous at all.